ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयीनमूत्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणीश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् अहमहमिति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामच्युतव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Brahmana. We will commence the Friday Atma Vichara by listening to Bhagavan's Upadesham. As usual, I will be reading from the book Self-Enquiry 19. Ramana Answers Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950. This book is a compilation of all the questions and answers on the subject of Atma Vichara. The questions have been put by many devotees to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan has answered them. And this has been compiled from various books by our founder, President Sarada Natarajan. In the Friday evening Atma Vichara, after reading the question and answers for this week, we will contemplate, meditate on it by the grace of the Master. And after that, we will have a 20 minutes self-enquiry session. Following that, our President, Sarada Akka, would be talking about Atma Vichara as it has been brought out in Ramana Gita, the conversation between Ganapati Muni and other devotees and Bhagavan, which is written in Sanskrit. After that, we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. The last few weeks we have been looking on the question answer, which I incidentally found. It is taken from the talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi, talk number 427, if I am right. So the devotee is asking, how is one to know the self? And Bhagavan is saying, it's not a relative thing to know. It's not separate from one or one to know. And that stillness, when one is still, then the I am that I am, as it has been recorded in the biblical statement, denotes the self. And the question last week the devotee had asked is, okay, if all the non-self is removed, I feel that the self will be realized. Then the Bhagavan asks, to whom is this thought that the non-self has to be removed? Continuing on that line of question, this week, the question number 38, which is also taken as part of talk number 427. Devotee says, I mean this, when I travel from Calcutta to Madras, I must know Madras so that I may not alight at an intermediate station out of ignorance. There are the signboards and the timetable to guide me in my travel. But what is the guide in search for the self? It is an often common question to all of us, that how far we are from the self. What should we do, and what are the signposts that indicate that I am traveling in the right direction? And for all of us, this devotee has put the same question to Bhagavan. I repeat his question. I mean this. When I travel from Calcutta to Madras, I must know Madras so that I may not alight at an intermediate station out of ignorance. There are the signboards and the timetable to guide me in my travel. But what is the guide in my search for the self? Bhagavan's answer, it is all right for the journey. You know how far away you are from Madras. Can you tell me how far away you are from the self in order that you should seek it? I repeat Bhagavan's answer. It is all right for the journey. You know how far away you are from Madras. Can you tell me how far away you are from the self in order that you should seek it? First of all, the Bhagavan is telling these signposts, these timetable, and all the information that one can get when one is traveling from Calcutta to Madras, indicating you are so and so, or thus far from Madras, or thus far from Calcutta, this is your arrival time in Madras. All of that is perfectly okay in a journey wherein you know there is that you are not in Madras and therefore you need to travel so much distance to reach Madras. And here, Bhagavan is kind of another analogy if we can take here to look at this question. First of all, Bhagavan is saying that this is not a journey. But often, when we all sit for meditation, often when we all start the spiritual seeking, we feel that we are this body, this limited entity, and there is going to be a journey that we need to take. And no matter how much we have traveled, this idea seems to be always there. I need to still further travel. I need to still further go somewhere to reach that self that everybody, all these holy men or this Gnani is talking about. So there has to be some journey that I need to still make, because it is there. It is the very seed of the person who is trying to become enlightened. That very entity which is trying to become enlightened is the limited entity. And therefore it always has this idea that it has to travel this far, thus far, to become the self or something like that. So Bhagavan is saying that the spiritual, we may not call it journey, the spiritual recognition or realization is not like journey. If as a simple analogy we can see is, let us say there is a golden ornament, an earring or a necklace or whatever it may be in different shape, and we can say that all our names and forms are equal to those shapes and names and forms of that golden ornament. One thinks that it is an earring, the other one is called a necklace, the other one is called a bangle, and some each of them have been given a different name because it has a different form and a different purpose. Now, how far or how much should those ornaments put an effort to become gold? If that question is asked, how do we go about that? Is there any effort really required for those ornaments to become gold? They are verily the gold itself. It is the gold which has been molded into a certain shape and with a certain form and for a certain purpose. Now, instead of seeing it as gold, if we see it as names and forms and its purpose, and that if that idea supersedes or is more stronger than the reality that it is gold, then only there has to be some journey or some effort where we may have to say this has to be taken to a goldsmith, it has to be heated, melted, then it becomes a gold. Because the idea of the gold there is that it has to be without names or forms. But when it had a name and form, it was verily the gold itself. Even when it loses its name and form, it is verily the gold itself. So this entire journey, Bhagavan is trying to say is, or the idea that we have to have and make a journey in the spiritual path seems to be incorrect. But we have to watch ourselves when we sit for meditation, when we do this spiritual sadhana. Am I holding on to that idea today that I need to make a journey from where I am to some becoming a self? And in these answers, we have to see how Bhagavan is saying that very idea is wrong. The ornament doesn't have to do anything to become gold. It is verily the gold itself. So, if that is recognized, then the Bhagavan asks, can you tell me how far away you are from the self in order that you should seek it? Now, in this example, we see the ornament is not really far away from gold, so that it has to become gold. But if for an instance, for a moment, if you think that the ornament had some intelligence, let us take it for that, for all our discussion, because this entity has some intelligence, or it is at least expressing certain intelligence. Let us say an ornament had an intelligence and it was thinking that it has to become gold, and it was told that it is verily the gold. Then, if the ornament starts to say, I am gold, does that make it gold? No. It is gold whether it accepts or denies. At all moment, the ornament was only a gold. The fact was that it was only a gold. Why is that its acceptance or denial is equally binding? Because it's both a concept. The concept is not gold. The ornament itself is gold. That's the truth. That is the truth that we need to recognize, realize that it is not that if I think I am a self, I become self. Or if I think I am not the self, that I will be any less of a self. It is the self I am, as Bhagavan says, be still and know that I am that I am. That I amness which is within me is like the gold. And this identification with the name Dileep and with the form that he is a man with so and so responsibilities, titles, and this and that, and therefore he has to make some effort away from all this name, form, and responsibility to become that self is like thinking the ornament, which is a golden ornament, has to let go its name and form, go to a goldsmith, do something to become gold. It is very much the same act. Or if it or if the ornament recognizes that it is already gold, that is also still a concept. Was gold before that, it was gold when it recognized, it continues to remain as gold at all times. That makes it very clear that it is the absolute truth. The identity that one is the self is always the truth, the unchanging truth. And what we are superimposing on that is the idea that I am not the self, I am so and so, I am a limited entity. That is the idea that we need to transcend. And for that, Bhagavan says all these ideas and concepts take their head out in the form of a thought. And he says, every time a thought rises, we should diligently inquire to whom is this thought. Immediately, the answer would be that it is for me, not for anybody else. Thereupon, Bhagavan says, immediately inquire, who am I? Because this individual notion, this identification that this thought has come to this frame called belief, this name and form, even that has to be questioned. Therefore, immediately Bhagavan asks us to question, who am I? And when we trace the source of that I thought or that I individuality to its source, we see that we are that stillness, that I amness, ever shining as the pure being, pure consciousness. And when we reach that source with the inquiry, who am I, and repeatedly dive with every thought into the source, whenever a thought makes us seemingly move outward, Bhagavan assures that the mind will gain enough strength to be identifying or to be one with that truth when all the vasanas are like the enemies of the fort come out in the form of thought are slayed with the inquiry to whom is this, who am I? And one day Bhagavan says the fort is captured. The immense grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path of Atma Vichara. For the next 20 minutes, let us do Atma Vichara.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self, manifest as Ramana, we are meditating in the satsang on the teachings of Bhagavan Ramana, the core teachings being self-inquiry. And in this part of the satsang, we are meditating on the verses of Ramana Gita, that is Ganapati Muni's compilation of the questions and answers, the questions to Bhagavan Ramana and the answers by him, which Ganapati Muni has compiled under 18 chapters on the line of the Bhagavad Gita. And we are meditating on the 5th chapter. We are almost at the end of the 5th chapter, a very significant chapter which is called the Hridaya Vidya, or the science of the heart. And Bhagavan has told us about the heart to begin with. He has told us that it is the spiritual center and it is not the physical center, it is the spiritual center. If one has identification with the body, then Bhagavan has described how the heart functions in relation to the body. And this understanding takes us to the importance of the source. Bhagavan says it is from the heart alone that the energy arises. It goes to the mind, and from the mind it permeates the entire body. So Bhagavan also gives us the possibility of tracking this energy back to its source. Then Bhagavan also has explained in this chapter the difference between Nirvikalpa Samadhi and Sahaja Nirvikalpa Samadhi. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, there is no perception of any object whatsoever. Whereas in Sahaja Samadhi, even if objects are perceived, it does not disturb the awareness of the self, the awareness of the non-dual self. So Bhagavan in these last concluding verses goes on to say how living only by the mind is like living in the night time, thinking that the moonlight alone is supreme. Whereas the sunlight is available to us always, the heart's light is like the sunlight. And the jnani is ever abiding in that sunlight. Thereby, the mind of the jnani is for him like a moon in daylight. The significance that we give, in fact, every thought that is considered to be important by us, we are giving importance to a reflected consciousness, twice removed from the truth. because there is the self. As Bhagavan says, the self is there. The self, and the self is from the heart, it is radiating energy to the mind. So that's one step away from the heart when we live in the mind. And what is the center of the mind? That also Bhagavan has given us at the beginning of the chapter. It is the I thought. All other thoughts are centered on this I thought. From the I thought, from this mind center, it pervades the body, and then this becomes awareness of the world, says Bhagavan. So there is the world. If one cuts back from the world, if one draws attention back from world or object, world is object, and the subject object relationship, I thought with another thought, the other thought is my thought, that is the world. The other thought signifies the world. So it is so far removed from the self or the heart center. So to experience the fullness, Bhagavan says we have to get back to the heart center. And the path, of course, is that whenever we perceive the rising of objective awareness, whenever we perceive the rising of the world in the form of a thought, we immediately remember that this is merely a thought. This experience which we are undergoing is merely a thought. And for whom is that thought? That thought is for me, the thinker. That is the first step. But then the thinker is also not the source of consciousness. The thinker is the source of all other thoughts. But the thinker is not the source of consciousness. It's like the moonlight. So we have to get back to the source, the heart. And Bhagavan says that in this other further verse, Bhagavan is telling us here, he had told us about the real meaning of the word prajnana. Consciousness is only the heart. He says, Drigdrishya bheda dhiresha manasi pratitishthati hridaye vartamananam drigdrishyam chaikatam vrajet. So he says this division, drik and drishya, bheda, drik, drishya, bheda, this division between the seer and the seen happens only in the mind. When one is living a mind-based life, there is duality. There is a division between the seer and the seen. He says, if one is in the heart, there is no such division between the seer and the seen. In his Ulladinarpada also, Bhagavan says that everything is one. Chitretra lokyam cha vilokita cha patah prakasho bhyavavat ekaha. Everything is one. In this world picture, the picture itself and the one who sees, the screen, the light, everything is only he says in that. Here Bhagavan is saying, Drigdrishyam chaikatam vrajet. That is, the seen and the seer are both non-dual. There is only one. Because Bhagavan has told us that what is this world? What is this world? It is the form of thoughts. It's only the mind. And what is the mind? There are thoughts in the mind. Okay, one thought after another thought, but they are all only thoughts. We seem to feel, we feel that one thought is different from another thought, and therefore this show of thoughts, this film which we see, is very engaging for us. It looks like it has a lot of variety. In fact, we don't want to stick to a single thought. We find it difficult to stick to a single thought. We find it boring. So the mind is trained to do japa, trained to repeat the same thought, whereby its multiplicity is gradually reduced. But when we look at the thoughts also, if we recognize that they're all only thoughts, whether it's green or red or blue, it's all a thought. Whether it's 2 or 20 or 2 lakhs, it's all only a thought. Whatever the number, it's a thought. Whatever the color, it's a thought. Whatever the emotion, it is a thought. And some thoughts feel very heavy, some thoughts feel very light, some thoughts feel happy, some thoughts feel sad, but there is no difference. Because if we look and ask ourselves, two things are common. One is that the thought, every thought rises, every thought sets, every thought disappears after some time. No thought is continuous. This is common between all, the common factor between all thoughts. Then no thought can arise if the attention of the thinker is not on the thought. This is also a common, they're all thoughts. Same way, every single thought arises only because of the attention. But if we look at also a single thought, what is this thought? What is the substance of which a thought is made? We say that a table is made of wood. We can say that, something, a movie, that which we are seeing now on the screen is made of light. These images are made of light in a movie. Similarly, what we see on the YouTube or on the screen, it's only light. We can see that everything is light, but we think there are so many images. When we see a movie, we think there are so many images in the movie, but they are all only light. Similarly, when we are experiencing the dream, Venkatesh Deshpande ji once put a question to us, who is the robber in your dream? And the answer has to be I myself. There is nobody apart from me in the dream. So in a dream, we may dream of so many things. We dream of the entire universe. We dream of ourselves also in the dream. We dream of God also in that dream. We dream of that which we know, that which we do not know. So many things. But what are all those experiences? They are all nothing but the light of our mind projecting those experiences. So that is a dream experience, the light of the mind. What is the light of the mind? It is the light of consciousness. There is only one light. The light of the self alone is the only light. The light of consciousness is the only light. There are no two lights. So that is projecting all this. All this entire projection is also only light. It's not different. It's not made of a different substance. It appears as if there is wood and plastic and cloth, and there is air and water and 5 elements, and then the 5 and the materials, different materials made of the combinations of these 5 elements. And then the 5 sense experiences and all the different, the taste is different and smell is different. But where is it experienced? Where is the taste? What is taste? Taste is for me a thought that I am tasting something. Sound is for me a thought that I am hearing something. Every experience for us is a thought. And where does this thought exist? This thought exists within me. Every thought exists within me. Does the thought have a gross existence? Supposing I am thinking of a wooden table. Where am I thinking? I am thinking within me. That I am certain. Within me, is there wood? Is there a piece of wood? Is there a structured table within me? No. There is only the thought of the table within me. The table does not exist. And what about I myself as a body? Is there another kutti small little body within me? There is no physical body within me. My experience of the body is also only of thought. It's all thought. There is no difference between my thought about my own body and my thought of a wooden table and my thought of something else, or my thought of love or sorrow or joy or hatred. So they are all thoughts, and they are all only just images of the light of consciousness. So one who abides in that consciousness, Hridaye Vartamananam, one who is present in the heart. Vartamana means present. One who is present in the heart. One who is not absent from the heart. Such a one, Drik Drishyam cha ekatam vrajet. There is no division between the seer and the seen for such a person, says Bhagavan. Now, how do we have to experience this? This is what he tells us in the last two verses of this chapter. He says, Murcha nidrati santosha shoka vesha bhayadibihi nimittairahata vrittis swasthanam hridayam vrajet nimittairahata vrittis swasthanam hridayam vrajet. He says all of us have the experience of the self. We have the experience of the self. He gives a few instances. Murcha, when one is in swoon. Nidra, in deep sleep. Ati santosha, when there is a peak of exhilaration. Shoka, ati shoka, when there is very, very great sorrow, deep sorrow. Avesha, when there is the height of anger. Bhaya, ati bhaya, when there is great fear. Adibhi, in extreme experiences. What happens? Nimittair ahata vrittihi swasthanam hridayam vrajet. Whenever one undergoes an extreme experience, the mind gets back to its source, the heart, Bhagavan says. So sometimes, you see, even in deep sorrow, one becomes totally silent. And after great joy also, there won't be any thoughts, further thoughts. So that at that moment, there is so much of intensity of the experience that the intensity of the experience removes the multiplicity of thoughts and makes it a ekachintana. The duality disappears because of the intensity of the experience. However, Bhagavan says, Tada na jnayate praptihi hridayasya sharirina. Tada na jnayate prapti hridayasya sharirina. We will not know it to be the experience of the self. We may feel the silence, but we will associate it with the experience. I slept well. I'm feeling peaceful because I slept well. I was so happy. My mind is very peaceful now. Or some of the people have said that when they were given anesthesia, they felt very, as if they're floating absolutely in bliss. Sometimes under the effect of drugs also such an experience can happen. But what happens is that the mind associates the Atmanubhava of that particular instance with the external factors associated with it. I had this experience, so I was very blissful. But Atmanubhava is not dependent on anything external to it. In fact, there is nothing external to it. So this misnomer would arise. This is the Laya experience. Bhagavan says, Vijñāyate samadhautu. When one is aware of that experience, Vijñāyate, when it happens consciously and not unconsciously, it is called samadhi. And that is the difference between the two, Samadhi and Laya. And what one must try to achieve is a conscious merger into the self. A conscious merger into the self is possible through the inquiry into the nature of this mind, getting to the root of the mind, which is the I thought, further inquiring into the nature of this I, one recognizes there is no such entity at all. Naiva manasam. Naiva manasam. There is nothing to call I. There is no entity sitting over there. It is only a notion. This has to be known through anubhava, through experience. When one experiences it, how will one experience it? Only by trying to look at it. Only by repeatedly trying to find out what this I is, trying to see what this I is, keeping on trying to see what the I is, gradually all the other thoughts would fade, and then there will be no duality left, and the I will shine forth as its own true nature, the self. This is what Bhagavan tells us in his extraordinary grace. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Thank you, Akka. Namo Ramana. Apara Satchit Sukhavadidashe Yasyornimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gabhiram Chinta Vihinam Hrudi Chintayami Chinta Vihinam Hrudi Chintayami. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Thank you, Titi. Namo Ramana, Shri Sanchi. Namo